Greetings and much love. My name is Kimberley, and I'm pleased to tell you that I am now able to post YouTube videos that are longer than 15 minutes, and so I'm going to start posting my interviews that air on my program on the internet on Blog Talk Radio called Living in the Now, on the Be Love Now channel, where two shows are hosted. Also, Healing for Inner Peace does a show, and I do Living in the Now mostly every Tuesday from noon until 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And below in the description of this video, I have posted the link to that channel where you can easily download these same interviews on the shows. However, the quality on YouTube, the audio comes out better than it does through Blog Talk Radio. Anyway, I'm pleased to introduce you to John Kettler, or for those of you who are already familiar with John Kettler, this is an updated interview. He hasn't done an interview in a while, so I hope you enjoy it. I also solicited questions from Project Avalon. I'm part of that forum. So enjoy. John, welcome. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. And I've been talking about doing this for some time, so things happen when they're meant to happen, and now is the day. So, John, first off, before we get going, I have questions, and I actually solicited questions from some people on the Project Avalon forum and through Facebook and whatnot. And But for those who are not familiar with you, would you please give us a brief rundown of who are you, John, and what do you do?
Who am I? I'm a researcher and a writer. I've done over 50 magazine articles, something like 30 blog posts now on my site, johnkettler.com. I've got a primary research credit in the Academy Award-winning documentary, The Panama Deception. I'm in None Dare Call It Murder. I spent 11 plus years in military aerospace at what was then Hughes Aircraft Missile Company, now Missile Systems Group, rather. Now part of Raytheon, and at Rockwell International North American Aerospace Systems, which is now part of Boeing. I was a military analyst working on every kind of threat from man-portable to deep space surveillance and anti-satellite weapons, directed energy weapons, air-to-air missiles, submarines, surface ships, tanks, you name it. If it was a threat to any of our product line or prospective product line, I was involved with it. The last project I worked on was military derivatives of the National Aerospace Plane, a hydrogen-powered single-stage-to-orbit craft we called NASP. And the craft that I worked on were called NDVs, or NASP-derived vehicles, which is to say they used aspects of the technology for operations within the atmosphere, what we call endo-atmospheric, and operations beyond the atmosphere, exo-atmospheric. So I have very broad experience in matters military. I was the in-house go-to guy on military affairs as far as the big picture went. I used to joke that we had people who knew everything about the radar on a particular mobile surface-to-air missile, but if the vehicle it was mounted on drove right through their office wall, they could not tell you what went through. I could. And my specialty was the Soviet and Warsaw Pact militaries. That's what I did for a little over 11 years. I almost went to work for Army Intelligence, Foreign Science and Technology Center while I was in military aerospace. I also almost went to work for Central Intelligence Agency as a what they called a case officer trainee then. Now they call it a field officer trainee, but I decided that that was not really for me, and I subsequently got involved in doing the Panama deception, working on some game projects and whatnot, and had a series of auto accidents, which put me out of commission for about a year at a stretch, and I've been kind of working my way back ever since. And done a whole bunch of work on internet marketing and things of that sort, and that was probably way too long. But these days I do the blog, and I write ebooks, and I put out the newsletter for the site, and answer lots and lots of comments in conjunction with Sunfire, who put us in touch.
So what's your current mission, John?
My current mission is to tell people as much of the truth as I can, consistent with not getting my sources killed and compromising things, and not so overloading people's brains that they collapse under the load. We used to refer to this in-house as making me drink from the fire hydrant. This was a request my boss at Rockwell levied on me. You can give people so much information that they just can't function. You can tell them things that are just too much to bear. And I think I've come close to that on a couple of the posts. And, let's face it, the kinds of things I'm writing about are really out there. Some of them are bizarre beyond words. Some of them are hard to accept. And there is a persistent problem with being able to prove a lot of things. That said, people routinely accept anonymous sources, stuff on deep background, a senior official who could not be named, and think nothing of it, but jump all over me for doing exactly the same thing. But what I get from my terrestrial sources is triple sourced to make sure I'm not being fed something I shouldn't be fed. And to the greatest extent possible, I'm also working with off-planet sources through interdimensional telepathy. That's described on my site at the FAQ. So what usually happens is information comes in from one end or the other and is checked with the other side. Plus, I put my own tests on it based on my years of experience, and I've been studying military history and weapon technology since I could read. I've worked on some pretty cutting-edge stuff in my own right, and was so good at what I did that I actually uncovered things that the government didn't want uncovered during my time, and actually, some would argue, before I even got into military aerospace. So I'm trying to educate people as to what's really going on. I'm trying to rip the cataracts from their eyes and get the wax out of their ears, so that they can take in the information of what is really happening, where the technology really is these days, who's doing what to whom, how it's being done, what the hidden agendas are, and things of that nature. And it can be pretty traumatic to people, and I understand that, so I try to kind of meter it. But if you ask me a direct question and it's answerable, I will do my level best to answer it. Okay. There are certain areas where I have to do some tightrope walking. There are things I know about what I call, and they call themselves the liberation forces, the benevolent extraterrestrials, extra-dimensionals, the ETZDs that I write about. Their force composition and who is here is something I'm not prepared to talk about either on my site or in any interview. The day will come when that will be a safe topic, but for right now it's order of battle information. Neither will I discuss my terrestrial sources except in very general terms, because if I get much more specific than that, their lifespan is measured in minutes. That's how serious this is. The kinds of things I talk about, people go to jail over. People are lost in the desert, as they say. People have heart attacks, in quotes, over. And so, there are people watching over me, both here and what I call topside. And they're watching over some other people too, and that really helps. But if I tried to do this a year ago, I probably would have lasted about 2 weeks, if that, because the things that I've posted have caused wholesale consternation in the intelligence community. It's the kind of stuff most people will never have the clearance to even access.
So you are protected and you're not being threatened?
I have been threatened before, and I am definitely being harassed. I get calls at weird hours of the morning. Some of my contacts do too. I've had disinformation agents attack me on the site. Started out arguing the facts, and when I wouldn't yield on the facts or the quality of my sources, it became ad hominem, direct personal attacks, which were vicious and nasty on me and the witnesses. And there have been others as well. This is the nature of the beast. Communications have been interfered with. Webcasts have had interference as well. I've had veiled threats in the intelligence community. When they want to talk about getting rid of somebody, they refer to it as lancing the boil. That's the euphemism for terminate with extreme prejudice. And there's been some talk of that. The current official view of the government is that I'm off my rocker and am no threat. I figure that's good until the next time I step on a sensitive nerve, which is inevitable given what I do.
Okay.
I'm in trouble over things I said happened in conjunction with Britain. No doubt the Chinese are no fans of me at the moment, and I could name a whole bunch of other countries that I'm probably not wildly popular in. Israel, because of the story I wrote that thwarted a Mossad hit team. France, because I revealed to the world that they had sold a retired ballistic missile submarine to Israel. And there's a bunch of others, too. I just don't recall them right now. But I am quite the rabble-rouser when it comes to putting out the information. And for me, it's all about the truth, or as close as I can get to it without violating the other criteria. There are things that my terrestrial sources don't want me to talk about, and I don't, for any number of reasons, ranging from certain things have to stay classified to talking about this now could get you killed. There are things that I sit on from the extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional side that have to do with planned operations or force constitution or status of forces or something along those lines. So it's a tightrope walking exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It very definitely is, and I always have to be very careful who I'm talking to about what, so I don't reveal the wrong thing in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, thank you for your service, John.
Happy to do so.
So I haven't heard this part of your relationship with the off-worlders. And when did they show up in your life? I'm curious about that.
A number of years ago, I know someone who is the earthly version of a higher dimensional being, if you would. Okay, we exist on multiple dimensions in reality. And from what I understand, we also have different lives going in those, in some cases, the simultaneous parallel lives. We humans like to think in just linear terms, but that is not the way things work once off planet. So this person used to say all these unusual things, and I have a business connection with this person. And, I mean, they were so far out there, even by my standards, they were nuts. And I was invited to a channeling session for this person. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I've seen channeling before. I went to, I believe it was Sandra Ray's Loving Relationship training, where she showed some film of J.Z. Knight channeling Ramtha, where this very attractive woman undergoes, facial restructuring and postural alterations and all this other stuff. And that wasn't what I saw. But what amazed me, I'm sitting there kind of cross-armed in this person's room while the channel goes to work. And all of a sudden I find myself having some of the experience of this channeling. That is to say, I can hear the other side of the conversation, and I get the occasional glimpse in my mind's eye of the person being talked to. Well, that was a real eye-opener for me. I mean, before that, it was things like, knowing that when the phone rings, it's your girlfriend, and that kind of stuff. But I'd never had an experience quite like that one. So that kind of opened the pathway, I think, to some degree. And then later on, I got some specialized coaching from this person and was kind of adopted, in a way, you could say, into that person's higher dimensional family. It turned out from information that was obtained that the home world I originally hail from was destroyed, and there were survivors en route, but they were coming from a long, long way away. So I did not really have the kind of support system this person did, and so I got kind of adopted. And shortly after I started the blog in November of 2011, along comes asteroid YU-55, at which point things start to really pop, because I was going to do black projects and cryptozoology and hidden history and suppressed science and those sorts of things. I've done a lot of that kind of thing for Atlantis Rising. That was the 50 articles that I mentioned, roughly. And some of that appeared in 2 anthologies, Forbidden History and Forbidden Science. But this YU-55 story comes along, and all of a sudden, I've got a telepathic connection that's opened up, and I'm getting not only fabulous information from my terrestrial contacts, who are have what I call nosebleed clearances. They're so high that, your nose will bleed. And who know lots and lots of people and have fingers in many, many pies. I was getting great information on what was going on from that side. And I started getting information from the other side, too. What happened was we improvised an interceptor rocket to keep this asteroid from hitting us. And about this point, disinformation agents showed up, too, and we were off to the races. So the information that I got from the EPZDs was wholly consonant with what I was getting from my sensitive earthly contacts, which is that there was apparently an outpost on the asteroid. And we also had Exercise Pacific Wave 11 fully deployed. It had been planned 3 years prior. It was a tsunami crisis management exercise, which is a euphemism for saying they let the thing hit and then they go deal with the problems that it causes. Originally, YU-55 would not have hit Earth, but it got diverted in its course. The EPZDs didn't know what had diverted it. Later on, I got some information that indicated it was a race called the Krulians, and the Krulian ship altered its course a little bit, and it was enough to take it from missing the Earth. Originally, the outpost was going to just slingshot past the Earth and go back the other way, but then it changed. And we were facing being hit with something as big as an aircraft carrier, a rock the size of an aircraft carrier. It would have come screaming in at 20,000 miles an hour plus, plunged into the ocean and shattered the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and caused enormous damage and a reverberating tidal wave. Not just the one-time wave like you saw in Indonesia. It would be like dropping a rock in a mill pond, where the waves go out, and then they hit the shore, and then they go out again, and they keep doing that. What happened was the Russians were reporting, and I was hearing back through my sources here on the ground, that the Russians were intercepting something that sounded to them like cats meowing. And so they came to be called the Cat People, and they were pretty sure they were on YU-55, and that was the information I was getting. There was no landing planned. They were just going to observe as they went past and carry on from there. And also about this time, a synapse went off in my brain, and I remembered the Egyptians had a cat god, or more accurately, a goddess, Bastet. And the Egyptians mummified cats,
right?
Large numbers of cats. They worshipped the cat. And I went, isn't that interesting? What wound up happening was we took a to-be demilitarized Russian 2-megaton warhead, mounted it on an Atlas Centaur, and launched it as an interceptor missile against the asteroid, the intention being to divert it, not destroy it. You really don't want to destroy an incoming asteroid, because then you get a shotgun effect where more of the planet takes a beating. Well, imagine our surprise when the nuke goes off and is contained. We knew the nuke went off because 2 radio astronomy observatories picked up the electromagnetic pulse emission, but there was no damage to the asteroid or anything else. But next thing you know, the asteroid goes up dramatically in altitude and greatly increases speed, and there's no way the nuke could have done it. at that point, it was very clear we had new players in town.
Mm-hmm.
And it was made explicitly clear to me that the intervention was on behalf of both Earth and her people and the innocent lives aboard YU-55. This whole YU-55 story brought out a disinformation agent who just kept on me and kept on me and kept on me and, was accusing the witnesses. He said, okay, well, you've got no witnesses to the launch, therefore the launch didn't occur. It wasn't reported in the papers. Well, I produced 3 through my contacts, and I decided since my witnesses should go on living, I did not reveal their names, but so next thing you know, he's accusing the witnesses of being drunk and things of this sort and just attacking me, and I let him go on for a little while, and then I said, you've exposed yourself as a disinformation agent, and the next attack that came in mysteriously wound up in the trash. I have no idea how that happened. So that was my first encounter with disinformation agents since setting this thing up, and I've been attacked by others as well. There was one that went after me both on the site and on my Facebook fan page. And there's somebody else who I think the jury is out on, and then we've had the telephone harassment, and we've had interference with emails. Sometimes it takes me 5 tries to get an email to some people. Things are sent out and just disappear. The government managed to put some code in over on the Amazon site that for a long time prevented anybody from posting reviews at all.
Wow.
They basically intercepted them before they were seen by the Amazon system. And there were the veiled threats and all this other stuff. So, I was told what to watch for and how to be careful, and given some consoling words by somebody who's also protected by ETZDs. A black helicopter got too close to her, and a portal opened in the sky, and a beam came forth, blew the living daylights out of the black helicopter, and the debris and the beam retracted themselves back through the portal, and the portal closed, and that was the end of that. And I'm told something similar would happen if somebody were to try to do unto me.
That's good to know.
But that doesn't mean I go, where angels fear to tread. I wanted to go to a UFO conference and was told absolutely not, because the thing was crawling with government operatives and disinformation agents. And, you know the rule about assassins. If one's determined enough, success is virtually guaranteed, and if you've got multiples, it becomes a very difficult problem to protect somebody. So that kind of cut down my reach, so I do my work through the blog, through the Facebook, through email, and through shows like yours.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. At this point, you did an interview with Carrie Cassidy. It was back in February, and I know that thousands of people have seen that and listened to that. And when you and I were talking prior to doing this interview, you said that several things have happened in the last couple of months. What would you like to share that has happened in the last couple of months?
Well, things that have happened in the last couple of months are quite significant. We have direct evidence that the ETZDs are intervening on the chemtrail stuff and have been for some time. I got and published a photograph from a gentleman in Europe that showed that when a liberation force craft popped in out of nowhere that a whole bunch of chemtrail aircraft freaked out and went into maximum rate evasion turns. And unfortunately, the craft disappeared before he could shoot the, get the craft in frame. But you can quite clearly see on the post that I did the aircraft turning frantically. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they damaged the airframes. The turn is so extreme when you consider these are, jetliner type aircraft that are doing this, not fighter planes. Right. I didn't know aircraft that large could turn that tightly. There have been raids on certain facilities. The one most recent was that they went into China, into their super secret, what they call their underground Great Wall. It's 3,000-mile long complex of tunnels housing thousands of missiles, intermediate range ballistic missiles and intercontinental ballistic missiles, and they took 1,000 at one swipe.
Wow.
That was 20% of China's entire nuclear arsenal. One of the members of the Liberation Forces also invaded the British Ministry of Defense and carried off a large photo of a craft and the file on the case. Just let them know, it could be done. This followed a raid that got me into political trouble, in which I was told there were Russian missiles on the Isle of Lewis. We weren't able to verify that with what we call boots on the ground. It caused a lot of consternation and got me into trouble with both the British Foreign Office and the U.S. Secretary of State. But the group that carried the missiles off still has them. So one fine day, there's going to be something rather spectacular appearing on the front porch of the Foreign Office. And then I will be vindicated. But in the meantime, we have to wait. I've also been told that at some point I will be taken aboard the craft and somebody will be along to take pictures, and I will be able to photograph other things that have been picked up, like Iranian suicide boats that the government forced Twitter to take down all the tweets concerning. Something like 40 vessels vanished in plain sight right in the middle of their attack runs. They were seen by U.S. Navy personnel, merchant ship captains, foreign warships and their crews, and, of course, merchant ship crews and fishermen. Widely tweeted on, and they made the whole thing go away as though it had never occurred. It was also seen by embedded reporters from, mainstream media, who were told in no uncertain terms that you didn't see anything and you will not submit your video and stuff like that.
Right, yeah, I heard about all that.
Like, poof! So I think all of that has occurred since I was on even the second of my interviews with Kerry. There are all kinds of events brewing. There will be additional raids. I won't say where. There's a hunting party being mounted to go out and bag a reptoid. People are being given special training in that, and turns out they're edible too, so if they manage to do it, I've got a recipe provided by the ETZDs themselves. There has reportedly been an attack on a reptoid substation in Utah, and, they didn't do fare too well. Some missiles that had been given to Libya were used on their complex, and I understand they were all crispy crittered as a result, and I'm trying to get video proof of that as we speak. And there is an effort underway to get sufficient information to visit a base for the liberation forces here in the United States. So there are going to be a whole bunch of things happening. I think that more and more evidence is going to emerge that this is real. I was put in a position via the British government. A demand was made on the State Department that I either apologize and admit I lied or prove that I have the contacts I say I do with the ETZDs. Well, if I can produce video of a smashed reptoid facility with, fricasseed reptoid carcasses, which are 8 to 10 feet tall each, or put missile transporters on the front steps of the Foreign Office, or any number of other things that could be done. Visits have been made, I understand, to certain foreign officials. Equipment has been made to disappear. They've had alarms going off in the past couple of weeks in one incident at Wright-Patterson, which is one of those areas where they store recovered UFOs and alien bodies and do reverse engineering. It's just nobody thinks about it. Everybody thinks everything's at Area 51, and it's not true. It's in a whole bunch of places.
Right.
So they had some pandemonium there as the ETZDs were scoping out the place. So it's just dull, dull, dull all the time. And then we have a bizarre, to us at least, new race that appeared in a comment that I got from one of the readers. And she described dealing with what we call an egg being. It looks rather like Humpty Dumpty. The one that she encountered had some sort of a pistol that looked like a 1950s hairdryer. It is believed by the intelligence community to be a laser or something of that nature because it's been observed shooting pulses of light. I initially just had her report, and from it, it was pretty clear that not only had she had an encounter, and these things talk telepathically too, but that she was abducted.
Okay.
So she reported she was started out the night tucked in her bed with her head on one end of the bed and finished the night out tucked into the other end of her bed. Subsequently, my sensitive contacts informed me there had been 2 additional episodes, one in Poland and another one in Finland, and I forget which one. They just floated down from the sky right into a family picnic. In the other instance, the thing floated down and got a very hot reception, a shotgun blast in the chest, which knocked it rolling down the hill, but unlike Humpty Dumpty, it didn't break. And these things don't run very fast because of the way they've got short legs and high centers of gravity, so the people were able to escape. And that was an awful lot to absorb, but subsequently we got another report of an encounter with one of these that had happened only 2 weeks prior. So it wasn't something just confined to the 70s and whenever the childhood of this one reader occurred. It was, practically in the current event category. And oh, did people jump on me over that one, you know. It became even worse when I got some information from the ETZDs, who initially didn't know anything about it, but I guess they hit their massive databases, and they found out that they were from the egg nebula, and they called them egg beings. So this just stretched people's credulity past the breaking point in some cases. I was called all kinds of names and things like that, but I'm not responsible for making people happy. I'm responsible for getting the information out. And I don't know whether you were a Star Trek fan when the original series was on or not, but
I was.
The motto was IDIC, Infinite Diversity in Creation. These things certainly fill the bill, because it took me days to get my head around it. Because it was so surpassingly strange. The intelligence community thought they were wearing armor, but I haven't seen any evidence of that. There was some thought it was a screen memory, but that doesn't seem to be the case either. It's just these, and especially in conjunction with the first set of information we had, where it talked about the secrets of the egg, and this the first person to talk about the egg being was talking about how distressed the creature was, that as a child she already knew the secrets of the egg, and it apparently triggered this whole outpouring and fascination with eggs. It went on to, I don't know, 15 or 20 comments maybe. I mean, it was like for a while that was all we were getting out of this woman, was discourses on eggs, the history of eggs, eggs in myth and legend. It was really quite remarkable. Out of the blue, a new race. There have been substantial reinforcements received by the liberation forces, which have created new opportunities to do things. There are cleanup teams at work within the oceans and waters. There are teams dealing with radiation. We should be choking to death from all the volcanic eruptions, and just today, and I'm probably going to blow the pronunciation, Tungurahua in Ecuador, and one in, I don't think it's the Philippines, I think it's Indonesia. You could look it up in Extinction Protocol Blue. But given all the volcanism that we've had, we should be choking to death on volcanic ash and sulfur dioxide and whatnot, and we're not. And progress has been made on the chemtrails.
Yeah, I've witnessed them evaporating and dissipating, unlike I've seen before. I've seen that happen a few times now.
Right. Yeah. People are seeing them starting to be laid, and they're going away. People have seen them, and I've reported on this, being gobbled up by ships that are following in their wake, and in one instance the ship eventually got tired of eating that and apparently shot down the plane. Went down over Apple Valley, but there was no wreckage found on the ground, so it was apparently some sort of disintegrator type weapon that was used. For the record, the Germans demonstrated a disintegrator weapon as far back as 1944 in the lab. So it's not like it's an impossible technology, and we've got some stuff in our inventory that turns equipment and men alike into basically goo on the desert floor. So it's not unheard of on our end either. But it's become harder and harder to do chemtrail flights. My understanding is they've started putting the chemtrail mix in skywriting aircraft and crop dusters as a way to compensate. But I'm told that in Afghanistan they shoot at them.
Oh.
And I suspect that's not the only thing that's being done. People have come to realize what's going on, and what's going on is a number of things, and we can get into that if you want. I have a tendency to run once I get started, and I feel I should offer you more opportunity to ask questions.
Well, I do have a couple questions that are relating to what you're saying, and they're questions that I solicited. And the first one that I wanted to ask is about the Fukushima radiation, and there are a lot of people who are saying that it's really horrible in Japan and they're just not telling anybody, and this person wants to know what you know about that.
They've had teams on Fukushima from very early on in the game, and I think people would be dying like flies were it not for the intervention from the higher planes, from the off-planet forces. Is there a radiation contamination problem still? Yes, there is. And if that other report is right, fairly significant. But part of the problem I have is I don't know how much faith I should place in the reports. And neither do my contacts, and frequently neither do the ETZDs themselves, because we're getting very inconsistent reporting, I'll put it that way. But there were instances from earlier problems with the reactor complexes, all of which are cited on fault boundaries, which is like a guaranteed time bomb. Sooner or later, you'll have a disaster. You know, you had radioactive snow over the Midwest that had to be dealt with. Otherwise, you'd have large-scale contamination. You know, I have a friend who lives in California, and after the thing first went in very short order, his radiation meter went up to some fairly attention-getting levels. So, but it would be much, much worse if we weren't getting the help. And so we are getting the help, but it's a big problem, and we've had little things to deal with, like preventing multiple attempts to start World War III via starting a war in the Persian Gulf. We've had other disasters to deal with. We have had to beat down an attempt to rip the New Madrid fault system wide open with explosives. That would basically tear the country apart, because what was territory almost devoid of people in the early 1800s is now heavily populated. The trunk lines for natural gas and electricity and gasoline all go through that fault system. And, you know, you got lots and lots of cities and towns built on the river bottom. So, you know, when the quakes hit the first time, the Mississippi River ran backwards for weeks. It is estimated that it would cause massive, massive flooding of the interior of the United States if this were to happen now. And they basically use the same damping technologies to contain the blasts and stop that attempt to create a justification for declaring martial law and a national emergency and imposing the New World Order. So there's been lots and lots and lots of putting out fires that's not very glamorous, and people are clamoring for big demonstrations, what they call lawn darts, because several submarines have been grabbed. And so people want them, you know, dropped kind of nose first onto the White House lawn or whatever. But the ETZDs are much more concerned with not doing dog and pony shows, but with carrying out the mission. And
Right.
the mission is pretty simple and straightforward. Liberate the planet from the psychopaths and the reptoids and the greys and the dracos, destroy the New World Order, and reverse the damage and whatnot that's been done. And some of the ETZDs have been the victims of the reptoids and the greys and the dracos, who've destroyed several of their worlds. Others have been occupied by them and only were recently liberated. So they're here as an act of gratitude, if you would.
Ah.
You know, people want demonstrations. Well, when you're fighting a war, and there most definitely is a war going on, there was another one in the upper dimensions just yesterday, I believe, and, you know, a force pounced from way up in the dimensional realms, and it was felt all the way down to the level on which the liberation forces operate, and a ship was hit. Luckily, it was recovered, and there were no casualties, but, you know, just like that beam popped out and hit the black helicopter and destroyed it, well, this hit a ship and knocked it out. And there are people in the hospital, people who were nearly killed. A few weeks ago, there were wars that just filled the hospitals up with battle casualties. So people are going, well, who are the ETEDs? Where are they from? What do they look like? What do they eat? Da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, I am not about to tell you that. It gives away vital information. You do not give away the specifics of your force composition in time of war. And I have to keep telling people we're in a war. I mean, it'd be like trying to conduct the Normandy invasion while under attack from behind and above.
Makes sense to me.
And they don't get it. Maybe they're finally starting to, but, you know, they seem to think that all they're doing is working on dealing with Earth, and they don't even perceive time the same way we do.
Mm-hmm.
We work on time. They work on what anybody who does planning and scheduling would recognize as milestones. That is to say, theirs is event-driven rather than time-driven.
Yeah, I understand.
And then you get into problems with conducting operations from higher dimensions and how that does or does not come out on this end, because it may wind up, if you don't do everything right, on a different timeline. You know, so I get a report that such and such a facility was destroyed, and I talk to my intel contacts, and they go, it's most definitely still there and unscathed, which causes great consternation among all of us. And then we've discovered things like there is a protective grid over the United States. It is based on ritual black magic, and it has severely hindered things. So we've had to figure out how to dismantle that. And there were booby traps protecting Earth, and the booby trap took the form of every time you did certain things that raised consciousness, this thing automatically went into action and did things that had the effect of lowering it. It caused fires and military conflicts to break out and volcanoes to erupt and all kinds of things. This planet has been occupied for a long time, is consequently very well fortified, in depth, and booby-trapped and mined 17 ways from Sunday. So people are going, well, why can't they just come in and do X, Y, and Z? Well, the short answer is they can't. The longer answer is that many of their craft can't operate within the atmosphere, so they have to solve these dimensional problems. They have to be able to work from higher dimensions. Some of the components of the liberation forces can get down very close to this dimension and operate quite effectively. Just ask the reptoids who've lost base after base after base. Most recently, a big one in China. And the Chinese were the beneficiaries of some very nasty reptoid technology, including the ability to transport large forces, a la Star Trek Beam Me Out, Scotty, and then hide them from overhead reconnaissance and ground observation unless you actually got within the area where they were. And so we had reports from both Canada and Mexico of Chinese troops and equipment being seen right along the borders, and food deliveries being made and whatnot. And then, like Brigadoon, they disappeared. Well, the good guys went in and got rid of that transporter. And they snatched that, and subsequently the reptoid base was destroyed by one of the stellar races that composes the liberation forces. But people are waiting and waiting and waiting and demanding and jumping up and down and screaming bloody murder over the chemtrails, because what's happened is in some areas it's thinned out, but in other places they've gone into overdrive. And my assessment, and that of other people, is that they are pushing as hard and as fast as they possibly can to get Earth to a tipping point from which we can't recover. Because chemtrails are a whole bunch of things. They're interfering with sunlight coming in, supposedly to prevent global warming, but really to prevent activation of our DNA so that the third strand comes online, which really gives us, as I understand it, the effect of 12 strands. They're interfering with that. They are, making it possible to do HAARP and various other things, grossly contaminating the environment with aluminum and barium, and Monsanto's tied into this. It's got patents on aluminum-resistant seeds. Apparently, aluminum blocks the pores in the roots of regular plants, so they can't grow and produce food the way they should. And we had an anecdotal report from somebody who had a prize organic garden, with huge tomatoes and potatoes and things. And a few years later, after the chemtrailing started, she tried it, even though it was in a protected area of the yard. She said her potatoes were about the size of marbles and everything looked small and sad. So you've got that angle, and then you've got a biowarfare angle in that these things are toxic to people. There's evidence that barium is highly toxic, and there's very good evidence that aluminum is tied to Alzheimer's in the population. It accumulates on the nerve endings and blocks the signals. So you've got that. Anybody with small respiratory capacity or compromised respiratory capacity is at risk from the chemtrails. So that means small children, people with respiratory diseases, and seniors. There have been cases where emergency rooms were filled up. I'm told whole towns have been wiped out by this stuff. You've also got another version where you get things that look like spider webs that come down, and they were found to have human blood sera and over a dozen known pathogens. And just touching one of those is enough to get you a trip to the emergency room. And that, of course, is tied to the goal of taking over 6 billion people out of the planetary population as part of the New World Order implementation.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen, is it? I mean, it's not. I don't think it's going to happen.
They're not going to be allowed to do it.
Right.
No. But that's what their plan is.
Yeah.
And also, this is related to terraforming to create an environment that is, Disneyland for the reptoids, the Dracos, and the Greys. That's the real ultimate objective, is to make this place uninhabitable for humans. So that's why there's this air of frantic desperation to what they're doing. And that's why you see these crazy bills coming out of Congress and all this other stuff. They're desperately trying to complete their agenda. Mm-hmm. But every time they try to do something, it blows up in their faces. They have not been allowed their wars in the Persian Gulf. They have not been allowed their false flag operations. Somebody starts rattling missiles, the next thing you know, the missiles all cease to work. Most recently, North Korea tried to launch what was allegedly a weather satellite, but was in fact an all-up test for a ballistic missile carrying a warhead. The only difference was it was a dummy warhead and a telemetry package. But in every other respect, it was a full-on ballistic missile. And it was shot by the ETZDs. It was apparently targeted by the Russians. It had a scalar signature, and there are, indications a number of others targeted it and or shot at it too. So it was like everybody jumped on this thing.
Okay.
South Korea was equipped to shoot it down, advanced model Patriots. Japan has advanced model Patriots, and there were a whole bunch of Aegis-equipped ships with anti-missile versions of the standard missile out there in the China Sea, positioned to intercept it too. So, other than that, there's absolutely nothing going on. When the grid comes down, certain operations will begin in earnest. There's a lot of reporting going on. One of the initiatives that Fulford seems to think comes out of the Asian secret societies, but I don't really believe it. It comes out of the liberation forces, the gathering up of the key personnel initially in the form of clones, because couldn't tell the clones from the real ones, but later on of the actual key beings that run the international banking system. And so you've seen this cascading effect ever since.
Right.
And there are big cracks in the media. I mean, when you've got Rush Limbaugh talking about giants on the one hand and UFOs on the other, something's starting to give. You've got resignations like Rupert Murdoch and Rupert Murdoch's son, and there's a lot more to come in terms of control of the media, because that's one of the keys to getting the word out to people, and there are, plans as have been indicated regarding that.
Okay, well, thank you for all of that information and update. Thank you. And
you're quite welcome.
As I
There's
said,
some exciting things that are pending, but the way things work is that I generally get very little advance information. They are deaf on operational security on things, and I tend not to get a whole lot of information on what's happened either, because they're so busy dealing with the next thing, whatever it might be.
Well, thanks for getting us up to
People
speed.
think that they should be able to do everything simultaneously and all the time, and it doesn't work that way. There's, in any war, there are only so many resources. And it's much easier for the opposition to start fires than it is for the liberation forces to put them out. Fires, both figurative and figurative and literal, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's any number of things they can do that cause other plans to have to be, if not aborted outright, at least postponed. You can't go deal with B and C level problems when you've got to worry about stopping Israel, say, from invading Iran.
Right. Well, listen, I have these questions, so let me do this first one. And some of these questions you've kind of answered part way, but anyway, I want to be specific. I'm reading a question from a woman, and she says, one thing has been bothering me for a long time, and that is that we often hear there is a non-interference rule when it comes to Earth affairs amongst our galactic universal neighbors. Yet it seems very clear to me that we here on Earth have been majorly interfered with in almost every way since day one. So my question is, who or specifically what group has the right to make decisions about under what circumstances we deserve help, and how is this decided?
Well, there appears to be, based on the discussions I've had with the ETZDs and their, what I call their ground contingents, who are people with those abilities and those connections, that the prime directive generally does apply. Earth had been under quarantine, and there are disagreements, I would have to say, as to the nature of that and why that's in place. But things got so bad here, and enough people woke up, and the planet herself, and the planet is very definitely sentient, and I can get into how I know that myself if you want to, basically put forth a call for help. And in the raw materials by Seth, it says the call goes by the square of the number. So enough of us woke up and started screaming for help at the same time, and Mother Earth chimed in, that they looked at the situation and they said, yeah, we really got to do something. And at that point, it's various galactic councils and others got involved. Plus, a lot of it came from Earth in other forms, which is to say the earthly versions of some of these higher dimensional beings that are here helping us basically went up in their astral bodies and started knocking heads and kicking butts and saying, hey, you know, we've got a real problem here. We have no means of fixing it. Here's why we have no means of fixing it. Hey, you up there on your lotus pads, you know, wake up. You've been blissed out long enough. In other cases, it was resurrecting beings that were horrifically damaged, had been tortured on a scale that beggars description. You know, it's not pretty. There's some stuff in the FAQ on that for people with strong stomachs, and there's a special warning notice on it. The state that creation is in is not good at all. So this is a must-win here, not only for the people of Earth, but because if we don't win here, the galaxy falls. Earth is an excellent springboard for the other side to operate from. When I say there's a war, there really is, and it's being fought with grim determination on both sides. It's not to say there isn't laughter sometimes. They have a great sense of humor. But the prime directive was not violated because we asked for help.
Right. I mean, I know I have, and so I know many others have, and therefore we have given permission. There have been enough of us that have given permission.
Right.
Okay.
Plus, the game was rigged, because we were overrun with reptoids, which we now know to be evolution dampers. That's their function, and they are very, very good evolution dampers. And then we had that device that was attached to the Earth, sort of like a Denver boot that spewed forth disasters instead of just immobilizing the car. Every time we started to make headway, it would dump all kinds of stuff on, so to not only block the headway, but reverse it. And certain actions that were taken to help raise consciousness and take some of the pressure off the people actually accelerated the other side's timetable. And that's what I mean by booby-trapped and mined. You just can't go do what you want. Some very, very devious, powerful minds set this up. And I'm happy to report that the mastermind for this mess is on our side these days, is still undergoing a lot of healing and whatnot, but has come to realize it, and what's known as I don't know if I should say that. I will just say that certain forces that you wouldn't normally expect to be fighting on our side are fighting on our side. I don't think I should be more specific than that.
Okay.
But yeah, so the Prime Directive was not violated here. The Liberation Forces are here at our direct invitation. They have a very narrow range of interests. They're here to get the job done. There are something like 20 more worlds in this galaxy awaiting similar services, too. So it's not just us.
Okay. Well, that leads me to this question, which I think the answer is no, but I'm going to ask it anyway. This person is asking, are you familiar with Tolek?
I know of Tolek.
Okay. Anyway, is Tolek right by saying that the reptilians' bases have been destroyed and that there are no more malevolent reptilians or greys on the planet?
Tolek is incorrect.
I thought so. But there has been...
I know for a fact there are reptilian bases because we're planning on destroying them.
Well, we have destroyed some, correct? And there are more to be destroyed.
Yes, there have been a number of bases destroyed. There was, as I understand it, there was that quake in Virginia, the 5.2, was actually a strike by elements of the Liberation Forces, destroyed an underground reptoid base there. The most recent one I know of was the attack on the reptoid substation in Utah near the Salt Flats. And the one before that, I believe, was the one that removed the reptoid base complex in China, leaving China with just what's known as the elder race.
And that's actually one of my questions. Who are the elders, and what is their role universally?
They've been part of China for a very, very long time, as I understand it. Many countries have allies among the ETZDs. Some good, some not so good. Ours, well, as they say from the Raiders of, or Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade, he chose unwisely. When we were given a chance to renounce our nuclear weapons in 1954 and were specifically warned about the Greys and what they were up to, we basically told them to stuff it and go away. If we had denuclearized then, and we were the premier nuclear power in the world and defined ourselves in terms of that, we could have had fantastic technologies. Our environment wouldn't be nuclear contaminated on the scale it is. We wouldn't have had roughly 6 decades of reptoids, greys, and dracos to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
At least certainly not at the officially sanctioned level in the form of an illegal treaty by the president. You know, we could have had clean energy, fantastic medical technology. Did we get some medical technology from the deal with the devil, if you would, that we made? Yes, but mainly we got weaponry and things of that sort. And surveillance technology that's being used against us. But we have the opportunity to choose again.
Okay.
We could choose to, as a nation, especially if this Drake scenario pans out, we could choose to denuclearize and sign a non-aggression treaty and do some other things, and we would be the recipients of all kinds of wonderful things in exchange for our nuclear forces.
So, John,
whether we will, I don't know. I mean, really what they want is global denuclearization, and if people won't do the smart thing and surrender the weapons by treaty, they'll be taken, as the Chinese found out to their shock and horror and embarrassment and dismay recently.
Okay, well, going back to the question of who are the elders and what is their role, I'm still not clear.
I don't know much about them other than that they are a very old race and have been involved with China for probably millennia.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Another question was, how are certain individuals picked to be in contact with the ETs, EDs? And is it a soul agreement?
I really don't know. I think that may factor in, but I think it's much more pragmatic. I think it's a combination of ability, training, specialized knowledge. There are plenty, being telepathic should be as fundamental as being human, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Being interdimensionally telepathic is uncommon even on their end. But there are some people who can do it, not just myself and Sunfire, for example. But the problem that arises is if you've got a bunch of telepaths, well, they want to communicate. Well, we're fighting a war. Mm-hmm. So really, anybody else who's calling who's not actively involved in what's going on is a hindrance and a disruption.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To the effective conduct of military operations.
Okay, thank you.
So they don't want other people contacting them. We've been getting people volunteering to go off and get special military training by the liberation forces. And even if they are telepaths, what we tell them is, if selected, you will be contacted. Do not bug them about it if you happen to have that ability, because they've got far bigger fish to fry.
Okay.
I mean, it may be a soul agreement. I don't know. But, the question's been raised of why me, and in my case, I think the answer is the combination of many past lives or parallel lives as a warrior, experience as a military analyst, familiarity with military operations, mm-hmm. a common lingo, the interdimensional telepathic capabilities I have, and a lot of work I've done on myself to be able to deal with all this stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. And this is an interesting one. This person is also asking about the London Olympics, and will your contacts be there to thwart bad things from happening? And she also says, but of course I'm hoping that the cleansing will happen before that time, being July 25th. Yeah,
I am told that right now the liberation forces have the Earth under such tight surveillance, it's doubtful a sneeze would escape their attention.
Okay.
So if there's any indications the bad guys are going to try to do something at the Olympics, that will be dealt with too. And they actually have the ability to read intention.
Okay, thank you. All right, and here's this one. All right, this one's a little lengthy, so stay with me.
It's all right. I've got time.
Do the ETs, EDs that you are in contact with, who from your blog posts seem particularly focused on stopping wars and nuclear armaments, have any interests or concerns about the NSA turnkey totalitarian state? I think that's a question. And he says, from my reading, some part of the dark cabal power over U.S., the planetary, citizens, seem to be concentrated in this super-secret organization with extreme technologies to spy on and control the citizens of our once-free republic, with mafia-type strong arming or murder of anyone who tries to expose any of the illegalities contained therein. With all this talk about upcoming arrests of the powers that be, where does this power center figure in the overall hierarchy of dark power in the apparent ongoing war between light and dark on this attempted prison planet?
Okay. The answer I would give is that certain operations have already been conducted against various pieces of the NSA, notably in Britain, as I understand it, against some rather horrific installations there. NSA's had certain parts of its communications interfered with by the ETs, EDs, and really annoying tones put through headphones and problems with equipment and things like that. The ETs, EDs are very well aware of the nasty nature of the NSA rather than just the one that people think it has. And they have big plans for the NSA. I've been pushing very strongly for the elimination of domestic surveillance capability, except for, legitimate functions, which is to say monitoring of incoming overseas calls and things of that nature, but not the kind of thing we've got where your phone calls, your emails, your tweets, your Yahoo Messenger, your this, that, and the other are all monitored by the NSA. Plus, they do clever things like to get around domestic surveillance laws, we surveil Canada, Britain surveils us, and so forth. So they're very well aware of it, and they have big plans for that and other pieces of the surveillance and control apparatus. They don't like it much. Okay. And it's interfered with some of the work that's been going on, communications between contacts and things like that. They have made life miserable. In fact, they, as I understand it, disabled a whole bunch of people's cars, so they mucked up our communications one night, and these people came off their shift and went out, and, their cars wouldn't start. What a shame.
Okay. Yeah. And then, this is actually my last question, and I saved it for last on purpose. And it's not just my question. A couple people threw it into the question, but I already had it, and I spoke with you about it a little bit yesterday, but I was waiting for today, is about Drake and his legitimacy of what you know from your side, and also your take on the pending mass arrests of the cabal. And before you answer that, I know that I would love to see that happen, and I'm here rooting for that to happen because we're ready for a change now, folks. But anyway, your turn. I wanted to have you
Well,
state.
for the longest time, the volume of information that was coming into the site in comments was just horrendous. We're talking 40, 50 comments a day, and here I am trying to answer them on a slow computer, mostly before Sunfire volunteered to help. And I was getting lots and lots and lots of stuff on Drake and Fulford and all this other stuff and Wilcock, and people kept talking about all these arrests, and then the channeled sources were jumping on this too, and I've been fighting an ongoing war to educate people about the channeled sources being either all but a tiny fraction being machine intelligences or AI avatars, if you would, on a gigantic, now known to be Reptoid, heavily armed ship that picks up people's thought patterns and beams responses to them based on who they think they're talking to, or ground-based and possibly satellite-based CIA mind control operations. Okay? So that's part of it. But, so it's jumped on and has been talking about arrest. And one of the things that I have come down hard on in connection with this is that the message about the imminent arrest is just wonderful. But if you deconstruct the message you're getting from the channeled sources, it basically says there's no problem that requires your attention or your action. You can go back to whatever it was you're doing, know you're being taken care of, all is well. Well, as I've clearly indicated throughout this program, all is not well. And everybody needs to be doing something to advance the cause of liberating the planet, be it talking to your neighbor or volunteering or blogging or getting somebody who knows absolutely nothing about this kind of stuff to watch a video on YouTube, whatever it is that your skill set provides for. Everybody can do something. That is the exact opposite of the message the channel stuff is putting out, which is sit on your butt and bark at the moon, because that's where they want you, on the sidelines doing nothing when you really ought to be up and doing, as they say. So that's part of it. I read it, and I took the information to my sources, who are extremely well connected and at grave risk if compromised. And that grave risk should be translated as mortal peril within minutes, just so we're clear. And they didn't know anything about it, and their reach extends way up on the one end and down into the operator community on the other. So if they didn't know anything about it, I was very much inclined to dismiss it as wishful thinking. But just last week, I was informed by a branch of the Liberation Forces that there is, in fact, something going on. And this greatly confounds my ground contacts. So I've had to do some education on the subject and was told that, well, the scheme that Drake outlined for what they want to do and how they want to do it certainly seems like a reasonable way to go. And I should say that I have experience working on common law trusts, and some of the ideas that Drake came up with and whatnot are familiar to me already. Some of the basic concepts. The implementation I was not aware of. The single biggest problem my contacts and I have here on the ground is the sheer duration that this thing has been running. If by, say, 1979, they had a 5-inch binder of contingency plans, and presumably a significant number of people who knew about it, because you've got to be able to execute on the plan when certain indicators occur, it becomes very hard to imagine how, with the kinds of contacts that I have and their experience and reach and breadth and depth and scope, how something like this could be running for what's now 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
I was told that it could be done, but it would be an awful lot of work. And it also automatically means that at the places where my circle of contacts has intersected those associated with the plan, they've either kept mum and pretended ignorance, or they've lied. And by the way, William Colby, the former head of the CIA, wrote, and I quote, "The first secret of keeping secrets is write nothing down on paper." Okay?
Mm-hmm.
A 5-inch binder in 1979 is a gross violation of the first rule, as I'm sure you'd agree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be 2 or even 3 times thicker than that. And people have to know at least their parts. Orders have to be either cut already or sitting in a computer somewhere ready to go at the push of a button. People have to know what's got to be where. So you're talking significant logistics issues. You have to have liaison teams in place with the marshals, for example, and things like this. So this has been a real head buster for us. It apparently is real. There are things going on. It is being screened by the liberation forces, or at least elements of it. Drake is protected, but there are also contingency plans in place in case he gets killed. There are what I like to call Pearl Harbor files, just devastating collections of information which will sink the cabal when released.
Mm-hmm.
But as it was put to me, either way, the cabal is screwed and is doomed. You know, it will be either dismantled piecemeal,
Mm-hmm.
or destroyed in a rush as a result of the Pearl Harbor files being released. That's my understanding. And I'm not fully current with the Drake stuff. I read the primary interview with Wilcock, and I've read some of the summaries of the now vanished 5-hour interview that he gave on Wolf Spirit or
Right.
whatever it was. The first hour was jammed, and I now understand that the remaining 4 hours have disappeared from the Wolf Spirit site.
Oh, well, I have a copy, so if anybody wants one.
Yeah. Well, that'd probably be a good thing to circulate.
Yeah.
I have summaries of a good deal of what was said, but
Yeah, I'll have to look into that because I thought it was
all.
already on YouTube and whatnot, so I don't know if it's not on the site. Anyway,
No, apparently it was wiped out, and I have dark suspicions as to how that was accomplished,
well,
too.
I'm just saying, I know that it's on other sites. There are a couple of other people who have it posted, you know, that they saved it themselves too. So I'll check into that. But anyway, I have a copy too. So
Yeah. So, you know, I've had to fundamentally reassess this thing. And part of the problem that my contacts and I have is that if you're doing something like this, especially when the opposition is perfectly prepared to not merely jail you or kill you, but torture your family to death in front of you, you know, how do you keep them out of the thing altogether? It's very, very hard to envision it. And as I noted in my most recent post, I quoted Eustace Mullins to the effect that they operate under the rule of 1984. They never allow more than two people to gather together in any kind of organization without inserting one of their own in the midst. If it's something harmless like, Dandelion Society, well, that person will, help pay the room rent or offer to pay for the minutes and whatnot. But we know from long experience that if it's a more radical group, the one agitating for blowing something up or killing somebody is going to be one of these New World Order types, an agent provocateur. So if you're talking about an operation that's been running for in excess of 30 years, to have kept that particular nose out from under the tent is somewhere past the miraculous range, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I say this as somebody who used to know a guy who, as a young cop, was at the organizational meeting of the Students for a Democratic Society and is sitting in the front row when they're chanting, "Kill the pigs." And I've been to meetings myself where there were government agents. We knew there were government agents at the meeting, recording things and noting who was there, and they were seen taking down license plate numbers. And so we'd start the meeting by chastising them for spying on us. So how is it that highly cleared personnel who are subject to all kinds of surveillance simply by virtue of being highly cleared, if they're involved in nuclear weapons in any way, they're even more surveilled, are able to do this? This is what makes our heads hurt.
Okay.
And maybe the answer is they're able to do it because their communications have been shielded by the liberation forces, even before they were called the Liberation Forces, and maybe they're also putting false message traffic in, maybe they're jamming certain circuits, maybe they're misdirecting things and causing things to happen that get the people who would otherwise be watching them looking the wrong direction. Maybe that's the explanation. I don't know. But I've had to fundamentally reassess the whole thing, and my contacts are in the process of that themselves. And I think now we have a better idea how to go about finding this thing. It calls for great subtlety and all that. But I think people can and will lie to your face about it if you ask a direct question. What do you know about, if you said, say, a coup, a planned coup by the Pentagon? If you believe Drake, 90% of the officers in the Pentagon know about the plan.
Yeah, that's what's been said.
That is not exactly a closely held secret.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back and look at Benjamin Franklin's thing, it's perfectly held by one, maybe held by two, and starts to get iffy at three. And you're talking about a lot more people than that for this situation. So I'm still trying to get my head around it. I've got my feelers out and things like that. But to a first order, somebody who is frantically running around liaising with all these groups is the easiest thing in the world to surveil and very easy to remove. He's highly visible. That's the last thing you want to be if you're trying to organize something like this, where such crushing counterforce at least used to be available. I don't know what they could do these days, but I'll give you some idea of what was available.
Okay.
There's a thing called WIO, Worldwide Intelligence Operations, which I think they also refer to as the Legion of the Dead. It consists of a whole bunch of people who are orphans who come out of things like the FBI and Mossad and CIA and whatnot, and they're assassins. There are 30,000 of these people, and they've been used by the powers that, we'll call them the powers that were now rather than the powers that be, to keep whole countries in line. They run compromise operations, they conduct horrific murders, take blackmail photographs, issue orders, do all kinds of things. The likes of an Olof Palme of Sweden would be taken out by such a group. And you have things like that. So these are the stakes that at least were in play. I think the tide is running against the cabal. Its bolt holes have been identified. And the ETZDs are actively pledged to shoot down cabal types trying to escape. So if they want to go to their nifty new place they're building on Bahama Island, according to some reports, there's going to be a portal that opens in the heavens and a burst of energy will go forth and a plane will explode, or a helicopter, or a boat, or maybe a submarine will sink, whatever it is they're in. And believe me, the oceans are transparent to these people, too. They can make underwater terrain that looks perfectly real to the submarine sonar. There could be a cliff face where there wasn't one before, as a for instance. They have the technology and won't hesitate to use it, just like they didn't hesitate to protect somebody they considered important. You have that level of involvement as well, and it's in keeping with their general policy of nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and they've long since been interdicting any attempts to reinforce the planet, killing whatever arrives as soon as possible after it arrives, or in the case of anything trying to escape, shooting it down as soon as it leaves the atmosphere, or shooting it apart would probably be the more accurate characterization, just vaporizing it. So, they kill reptoids and Draco and gray ships on sight.
That's good to know.
Don't mince any words about it. It's kill on sight. And that would be what they would do with the cabal once the arrests begin. But I'm hearing that the arrest will be not large scale and quiet, or at least as quiet as possible, so that you don't have, large numbers of cabal members all trying to get out of the country at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I think Drake's kind of changed his tune a little bit. I'm understanding that it is kind of happening, a little bit at a time currently. So that's one of the things that was said recently. Well, listen, John, we only have a few minutes left, and I totally appreciate all that you have shared with us. And I just wondered if there was anything else that you wanted to say that you haven't had a chance to, or reiterate.
Well, everybody can do something and needs to be doing it. If nothing else, wake up in terms of what's really going on, what's out there, what the technology is, recognize you're being propagandized against the liberation forces with all the shows and whatnot. You're not seeing friendly ETs, EDs at all. I would also say that, I'd encourage people to come to the site. We have one ebook up already, UFOs, Anti-Gravity, Vimanas, and Mystics, which is quite a good read and has been very well reviewed. And within the next week or so, I will have a second ebook up called Extreme UFO Recovery, or is it UFO Extreme Recovery? I'm not certain. And I've been up a lot of hours, which has information which is going to cause people in the intelligence community to need new underwear and possibly new uniforms, too. It is a story that was too hot for the magazine I used to write for to handle, and it shows the lengths to which the government has gone in the past to keep the lid on the UFO stories, especially the recovery stories. People were murdered to keep this one under wraps. And I've got stuff in there that I've got levels of detail and analysis and even plot twist courtesy of the ETs, EDs, where they were able to identify the craft. So we have very lively discussions and comments, and I'm forever finding new and exciting things out, and the blog is growing like Topsy, as the saying goes. In fact, we were down for the best part of a week because we kept exceeding our server capacity, and we're now on a dedicated server, and we'll soon have a new theme, so the way the site appears will change significantly. It'll look more professional. We've just pushed the existing theme to the point where it's about to collapse under the load we've imposed on it. I have thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to be on your show and talk with you and reach an audience that I probably wouldn't otherwise reach. I'm very dedicated to getting the truth out.
Yeah, me too.
I would still be doing this. I started doing this long before I had guarantees of protection. It's nice that I've got protection available and would have early warning if somebody were going to make a move on me.
Yeah, I'm glad to know that too.
Pardon?
I said I'm glad to know that too.
Yeah, well, it helps. But this thing, is basically being done on a shoestring by people who are working very, very hard, long hours and aren't in the best of health. Neither Sunfire nor I is in anything like normal working order. And the webmaster who's holding this whole thing together is working effectively 20-hour days. Certainly has been with the crunch lately.
Well, thank you, all of you. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. We appreciate it. But this thing has clearly found a home in people's hearts and minds, and we're getting more and more people coming to the site. More and more people are going, oh, I heard something about that, or I saw something, or did you know this, did you know that? And, the information processing load is just off the charts. I mean, maybe it was a good thing the site was down so that, for example, I could read the Drake interview and actually knew what people were talking about. But with a computer, between the time crunch on me on the one hand, all the things I had to do on the other, that alone was daunting, and then you throw in a computer that's barely working, and people keep sending you videos, you never get caught up.
No, I don't ever get caught up. But that's makes life interesting. So,
and I would be very happy to come back and do other shows with you, should you so desire. I love to talk about these things. And I think for those who haven't been to johnkettler.com, and you can get there with or without the www dot, for those who haven't been, it makes them aware of a very valuable alternative information resource.
Oh, yeah. I go there every couple of days.
And the other thing is, even if you already are, these sorts of broadcasts help people get to know me and understand me, and that I'm not just pulling this stuff out of thin air or a certain part of my anatomy. That I'm a real person. I do have a background. I know what I'm talking about. I was cleared through top secret. I worked in this field for 11 plus years. I've been studying what makes the world go bump since probably the 70s.
Well, like I said, thank you. And our time is up here because my show's a 2-hour show, so I have to keep an eye on the time.
Oh, okay. Well, when we first started this, when we talked about it last night, it seemed to be very open-ended.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm just going to keep it. I'm going to keep it to the 2 hours, and that'll make it better for everybody. And,
okay. That's fine. Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, and definitely we'll definitely do it again sooner than later.
Okay.
All right.
And thank you all for listening.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be posting more interviews on YouTube, so if you enjoyed this one, feel free to subscribe to this YouTube channel, Love Light 1111, and if you want to join me live on Blog Talk Radio Living in the Now, the link to that show is posted in the description. Also be sure to check out John Kettler's webpage, which is johnkettler.com. Thank you. Much love to us all. Bye.